The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below.
Hey there, this is your orchestration tutor Thomas Goss, starting bright and early in the morning. It's actually before 6 a.m. here in New Zealand, and it's so great to start my day with such a nicely scored entry to the Orchestration Challenge 2020. What I really love about this score right here is just the proportions. They are quite economical. Nothing is being overblown. Largely, the articulation style is correct. There is a little bit of there is a little bit of a compromise here. As you know, I've been sort of pointing out several times that the melody really goes to this note right in here. Bum 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 bum. It doesn't actually go to this high note up here. And it works in this case because the second voice is so prominent rather than being subsidiary. Okay. However, it does set up a conflict in that all of these resolutions right in here come off as being as repeating what happened before, right? That's one of the reasons why I think Lily made the theme go right straight through the harmony, including that one harmonic note above, right? But that's all right. That's a minor point, but I just wanted to point it out now. And what I thought was great was, for the most part, how it used the sound sets very, very well, while also mostly conforming to something that would be playable for an orchestra. Okay, there are a few little things that I think that that need to be adjusted. Okay, the first thing is that celesta really is, you can market mezzo forte, but it is not going to be playing mezzo forte. Like this touch right in here with the celesta is going to sound beautiful. And these little chiming notes are going to come through really, really nicely too. Here you will hear the celesta merely because there's nothing going on here except for strings. You'll hear some celesta, but it won't be all that prominent. Just be a touch of color, right? If that is all you intended, well, that's what you're going to get. Then there is something which really favors the whole sound set kind of scoring, and that is to boost the melody note to mezzo forte. Now, there is really no need to do that in a concert situation, to have soft, soft background, and then medium loud solo. If you were just to mark everybody piano and then have the solo part marked piano and then solo, then the player knows what to do. They will stay with a restrained tone that will still play over the rest of the orchestra. Okay, especially since you have made the work easy for them. Look, really nicely subdued sounds with just horns, oboes, and French horns. This really is a lovely pad, and is very effective if the players are really soft. And in fact, if you were to take that approach, you could get away with having the flutes or the flute be piano, and then the everybody else could be pianissimo, and it would come through really beautifully. However, the triangle is actually an extremely soft instrument. So marking it pianissimo, it's really what happened in the mock-up is really what's going to happen in real life. You're not going to hear it. It should be marked piano along with everything else, or even piano with a tenuto mark. Now the little touch of harp, sort of punctuating the downbeat, is really lovely as well. You've taken a very static approach here. There isn't really any motion going on, so except for the melody. So this kind of pacing is crucial. So I really felt that was great. And then right here at the end, just adding that touch of celesta, and over the roll of the harp that's just very, very well done. And just nice colors all around in your winds and horns. Now, here, about the only thing I would say here is that just watch out in your scoring that you keep a variety of timbre. Now here I don't have a criticism because you went from flutes, like from flute 1 to clarinet 1, which is really a different sound. However, they're both woodwinds, right? So it was great that you had some support from strings, but maybe a little bit more would have been more perfect, right? And just a touch here of harp, pizzicato, the rolls, basically covering some of the same notes as the strings. That was very cool. We're missing this middle note here, though. Like, you throw in the B and then you go to the A and the cello, and that's actually great. I really like the voice crossing. And it really does help that inner voice speak out, right? So, I mean, largely, I think you could have left out one of the violins right in here just to keep it more delicate. But then again, that does help support the clarinet, so I'm not complaining about it too much. And I really do like the approach here, similar to the one that I have had, and that is pizzicato plus bass clarinet gives the effect of pedaled piano or of a held piano low note. Not the sound, right? You're not trying to imitate the exact sound, but you're trying to imitate that whole idea of the attack being like a piano, right? Which you get from the pizzicato and the harp, and then the sustain of being like a cool, long sound that doesn't necessarily attract a lot of attention, right? Which the pizzicato, of course, is not going to give you. This is wildly optimistic in terms of how long your double basses can really hold this sound. I would say you could get away with just a single dotted half note is probably good enough. Yeah, but I mean, tying it across, there's going to be almost nothing left right in here. But you can get a sostenuto sound. See, like this is much more rational, in terms of the actual amount of sustain that you get. Here, I really like the way that you slurred into the staccato, right? So that still gives you an articulated downbeat, right? Da 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 da. Dun, 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 right? So that is a case of slurring across the bar line that I would approve of. Okay. Now, it's okay. It's not that I disapprove of slurring across a bar line in general. Not at all. It's often necessary. It's just that sometimes there is so much of it for no reason, and that is what I've seen in some of the arrangements so far. Okay, and it's just because of copying Lily Boulanger's piano phrasing onto instruments that don't use the slur as a phrase. They use the slur as a breath mark or as a bow mark, right? I really need to put out my video. I've planned a video for about 2 years now since the Bartok challenge, and that is 10 common transcription errors, and that is one, and I almost feel like next challenge I might just clear up a lot of these things, so I don't have to keep mentioning them all the time. Okay, but in this case, that really is a way of getting it right, of having a beautiful slurred bar that bounces off into the next bar. Okay, so that that was all good. So we've got the oboes, clarinets, and bassoon, kind of bouncing back and forth with this, with harp and mezzo staccato strings. So it does not bother me that there are different approaches here, like mezzo staccato in the strings and then just plain staccato in the winds. That is actually a really nice sound. And then here we get the variety of the flute taking the melody, plus clarinets, plus bassoon. Because we took the strings out here, we get enough of a variety of timbre, right? And there was enough of a drawing back here of dynamic with these hairpins that this first piano note could start off without being overlapped by previous loud sounds, right? So that was a really great idea too. So, and then we've got the glissando here in the harp, and ma da 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 dum, and yeah, this is all scored very nicely. This actually does not need to be divisi in the violins because sixths are just so simple. This fifth is not the most comfortable thing, but it's practically, it's practically a sixth because B flat to F sharp, that is an augmented fifth, so that's also very simple to play. But it's fine to have it divisi. Don't get me wrong. Okay. It's just that it's not difficult to play unison if you needed it to be. And then the little ending here is just really lovely. I just felt really beautifully proportioned with those clarinets taking the resolving voice right here in the middle, and just along with strings and a little bit of rolled harp and French horns. It's really, really nice scoring, has a beautiful color and wonderful simplicity to it. Sometimes stating things simple takes as much work as it does to state them complexly, and to make your score sound like it was the original idea of the composer, right? Which this really does come close to for my ears. So great way to start this little collection of evaluations, and actually my whole day, because I'm going to see how many I can do today. If I can do maybe 2, I know I can do 2, maybe 3. We'll just see how we go. But I really do want to cover a lot of website evaluations today to help catch up and to give, maybe a dozen people out there some evaluations they've been waiting for a while. All right, so thank you so much. Now on to the next entrant. Our next entry is from a pseudonymous contributor. And so what I will just say here is that is another really lovely interpretation. There is a real attempt here to bring new elements into the original work, and that is actually something that Lily did in her own interpretations. If you see her orchestrations, she adds voices, she adds lines, she finds new things in a work that might have originally had a fairly simple structure to it. So that is all kosher. It's totally fine as far as scoring her music is concerned. Now, one of the things that makes it difficult for me, and also for some of our viewers, is the fact that these the staff size is so very small, and I think that it could have been larger easily on this score. As I was said in the guidelines, I had a certain staff size in mind, and that was one of the reasons why I sort of mentioned. And I suppose I could have gotten in touch with the with our entrant and said to up the size, but we'll just deal with it. I'm sure it'll be fine. Okay, so let's look at the orchestration of the melody to start off. So we've got flute plus bassoon, a great color. It's been used since the classical era, but that doesn't mean that it has to necessarily have a connotation of the classical sound, right? The classical style. It can still be used in ways that sound more impressionistic. And I think that that's what we're seeing here. And especially, I really like the contrast, piccolo and English horn, which is a really nice combination here. And then all of the winds pick up the melody here. I would say that the flute probably should be an octave higher, because it's just a situation where it's sort of buried here. It'll be overwhelmed, right, by the oboes, right? I would say the flutes don't actually need to come in until right around here, right? There will be a little bit of blending in here with oboe plus flute, but it just on the lower notes especially, it's almost there's almost nothing that's all that strong. Now, there's a big battery here of percussion instruments, one of which wasn't used at all. It's the Mark tree. So that could have, eliminating this instrument could have given us a larger staff size. But in general, I'm really struggling to read this. Okay, continuing on. I really like the little waltz. Here there is upward rolls marked in the harp, and that's really, as I've said in several other entries, do not use upward rolls on your harp as a default for the roll mark. The standard roll mark without the arrow is fine. The only reason to use an upward roll mark is if you also use downward roll marks, and you need to tell the player, right? Because if the player looks and sees this upward roll mark, they're going to expect to see downward roll marks somewhere in their part, and they might start looking around for it, and that just wastes time, right? So just use the standard roll mark. Do not use the upward line unless you have a downward line to contrast in terms of direction. You need to be specific, okay? All right, I'm just seeing way too many. I actually wrote a tip about this in 100 More Orchestration Tips. But yeah, just please, everybody, stop doing that. All right? It's not needed. Just use the standard roll mark if that is the only direction you're going. Okay, nice little touches, glockenspiel, triangle. Now, timpani would not be positioned inside the percussion group, right? That the timpani would get their own staff above it, okay? And then the standard percussion would be under it. And that's just because the timpanist is their own section. If you talk to timpanists, they feel very strongly that they should be on top of the percussion the same way that the horns are on top of the brass, right? Because they are really they serve a function that is unifying across the entire orchestra, as opposed to the percussion, which are often used to emphasize certain beats or to push certain rhythms, right? But in this case, you really are using the timpani as a unifying element here. It's basically playing the bass line along with your other instruments. Now, this is going to give you enormous weight, probably more weight than you really realize compared to the rest of the score. And that is, you've got your heavy brass doubling on the same pitches, tuba and bass trombone. And then you've got contrabassoon an octave below that, right? And I know what you're trying to go for here, and that is sort of like a pizzicato sound without the pizzicato, okay? And you've got your lower strings just basically holding down a pedal tone here, right? And it actually works pretty well. I do like the whole French horns plus bassoons plus violas idea right in here of, and then contrasting with the trumpets, playing the little triplets and so on, that are eventually joined by the horns, and then of course xylophone, accenting that, sort of giving those triplets a lot of weight and punch. Okay, not so sure how this is going to come off here. This xylophone tremolo here. It's really going to have like kind of a sound. Maybe even somewhat unpleasant, right? It's not like the same trick on a marimba. It might end up sounding more comical than you expect once you are having real players play it instead of a sound set. Okay, and I almost feel like this particular glissando may be unnecessary, maybe sort of gilding the lily, right? You've got a celesta glissando already, plus then you have this rip upwards to the trill in piccolo and oboes, and then finally you have this beautiful, see, like this one right here is worth the whole page, right? It's just like that really ties everything together. So it feels like this is sort of premature. This one beforehand, it's like gilding the lily. It's sort of like, well, the lily's already beautiful. Let's paint some gold on it, right? So, yeah. But other than that, I felt the treatment of the melody is all right, so long as we have this doubling of it. Now, not so sure about the ottava mark is really not needed, until you get to the last bar. I would say just try to avoid it in general, right? It's a lot of players can get along without it. They can read this last note right here, this F, even way up there in the top octave. Okay, so yeah, so you don't really need it, but like here in the score, it's fine. But even here in the score, I would actually not introduce it until about right here. Okay. Because there's nothing about these 3 bars that can't be read without it, right? So just really avoid it if you can. Okay, so that's our first page. A lot of information, a lot of very cool scoring. Then here on the second page, my only critique here would be that these added elements are really similar to the ones that you had before. And I mean, there are some different approaches here to the scoring, like these these high tremolos. There's no need for these tremolos. Like, look at all this dynamic mixing that you've got in here. Piano, pianissimo, mezzo piano, piano, mezzo piano. You know, you have to understand that there are 60 people sitting in that string section, and they're all listening to each other's section, or all of the other people in the section, all the other players. They don't know that the other player has got a different dynamic marking, right? So here you've got your firsts, and they are leading the section. They're playing piano, and they're playing this tremolo, right? And the seconds are sitting right next to them, and they're marked pianissimo, and they're probably thinking, "Wow, that is a pretty strong piano." You know, they think that the first violins are playing pianissimo, right? Because they'll assume that they're all playing the same dynamic. So they'll say, "Oh, that's a pretty strong pianissimo that the first violins are playing. Well, we better do that too, right?" And then then the same thing will just keep going down the whole row. Really try to score things so that you don't need to do that, right? There are ways of the functions of the instruments that are playing will very well in themselves balance out if you just score it right, okay? So really try to avoid those kinds of things. Or like right here where you've got mezzo forte in your violins and mezzo piano in your cellos, right? There's no need. Absolutely no need, okay? But I mean, it is a cool idea. All that aside, aside from the fact that like some of these strategies you've done before, it is not that there's anything wrong with the scoring. It's just that the strategies that you used to create variety in the score are being used again in the same way for the most part, right? So that it's sort of like, I think I'm going to wear red socks today to school. Wow, that's great. And then you wear red socks to school the next day, and it's sort of like, well, yeah, look, it's the red sock guy. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's adding unique elements once again the same way starts to call too much attention to them and not enough to the music, right? So that would be my point there. Okay, all the same, it's scored pretty well. I really do enjoy that. Now, we're going to bump, 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 bum. So, pizzicato in the strings, staccato in flutes, clarinets, and bassoon, and then, ending with a little bit of trill. Okay, do you have 2 English horns? All right? We've got thirds here. Maybe this was intended to be oboe. And then, I really liked the fact that we had this reaction, bum, 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 bum. So do you really want dun, 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 dun? Did you get these backwards, right? Did you intend for this to just explode outwards? The problem is, okay, the first thing is you've got the hairpin going past the rest, which doesn't make any sense. Like the player will think to themselves, wait, do I need to play past this rest? Is there something about this? Is there some new technique? Or that's the first thing that they're going to think. And then what I think as your coach here is that, like, once again, as I mentioned in some other scores, we really need the first, we need the downbeat of this bar to not be, to not have things washing over into it, right? Since it is largely softer. Now, mezzo piano in the brass is going to be pretty much like mezzo forte in the strings and wind, so it's not that big of a deal, but still. Okay, there's, if you get mezzo forte tuba, and who knows what this is, right? Maybe mezzo forte bass trombone too, and everybody else is playing mezzo piano, you're going to hear tuba louder than anything, okay? They should all have, like, right here, I would say mezzo piano in the brass, and then continue mezzo forte in the bassoon family, and then you have a balance. All right. Okay, and then this is nice, the way everything is just brought together, but just really have uniform dynamics. All right, they're all a section; they can all play as loudly as each other, except for the horns in extremely loud passages. Right, so just bring them all down the same way. All right, and then bum, 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 bum. That's all good. I would say, what if you cut out the tremolo when you got to here, right? Tremolo, normal. So you have a release along with the harp, right? Rather than keep on tremoloing and then resolve. Because the resolving notes, right? Some notes are continuing to tremolo, some are resolving to non-tremolo, right? And it just like it doesn't quite fit together, right? So because like, and then some notes are tremoloing and then stopping their tremolo, and some are continuing, and it just feels kind of confused. All right. So those are my critiques for this score. Really, really fun. Just so enjoyable to see people playing with ideas and having great scoring ideas. So next, I really do want you to contribute a score to the next challenge, my man of mystery. But I would like you to have a larger score size. And if you are scoring in Sibelius, just send me the Sibelius file, and I will set it up in a landscape format for you. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And you and Evgeny, you guys have come up with some great ideas. I would really appreciate it. People always say, "Oh, thank you, Thomas. I wish I could do something for you." And like what you can do for me is you can make some comments on some of the other scores in this collection in the YouTube comments below or on Facebook, please. I really would like to get some dialogue going between the people who are submitting scores and have them help each other. And I just feel that is a really good strategy in life, is to learn to comment supportively on each other's works, and then we all grow together, right? Instead of sort of fighting over everything and constantly putting each other down, or just ignoring each other, right? Those strategies do not work for a long-time career. Okay, so I've said enough. Really great score. On to the next one. Yet another great score, this time from Evan. And yeah, I mean, this score actually goes on quite, and actually Evan scored the entire piece. And I would just say, Evan, once again, like if you, if you want feedback on that, me to spend the better part of an hour explaining it all to you, really consider, just as a return for that huge effort that you put into this, consider supporting on Patreon so I can go past this, because it's just a crying shame that I, according to the guidelines of this challenge, that I can't go past that double bar. Okay, but once again, this is great. This is a nice 3 in a row so far of just really excellent scoring, and yet a lot that I can talk about. So, a couple of things, all right? Just in terms of dynamics, there is really some settling into mezzo dynamics, and I just really want you to see how much you can avoid that, right? I'm just seeing a lot of mezzo on the page. So, try to avoid that, and also try to avoid things like this: mezzo piano crescendo to mezzo forte. Okay, I'll have some more to talk about this little phrase in a little bit, but yeah, it's like from blah to bleh, right? Mezzo dynamics are dynamics that take away from the unique character of the instruments, right? They are grayer colors, right? They are sort of medium. They don't commit. They either lack restraint or they lack power, right? They're just right there in the middle, and they're not, like in terms of tonal color, they're really not that interesting, okay? Like for instance here, you could have said piano dolce 1 solo, and you get the same exact effect without having to mark mezzo forte, right? Plus, put in some crescendo marks in here and back off on the other ones. All right, so anyway, let's talk about the scoring of this piece. So starting off here, I really love the trills in viola and in the third flute. That is actually very strong because everybody else is very soft, right? You've got clarinets and bass clarinet, and then very soft middle strings. Here, I would say pianissimo, all right? Everybody needs to be pianissimo. You don't mark piano because it's divisi and you're thinking, well, you know, there will be less of them, so I should... No. Everybody should be the same dynamic, all right? They will balance, all right? Just don't give them unbalanced dynamics, right? So in here, like, this could be marked piano espressivo, and then it's fine. It's a way better thing to balance than to go into mezzo all the time. Like whenever you want, oh, I'll have it a little bit louder, please. The players know what to do if they're marked solo. If they're even if they're not, if they're carrying the obvious melody, they will know to make themselves louder. All right. I really like the little touches here: glockenspiel, harp, harmonics, and everything else. A little bit of pizzicato from the double bass. So it's really a beautiful, delicate way to start. And I love the way that you develop it. You're adding more motion here in bassoon and, more timbral color. The problem, all right, the problem is that this melody isn't just da 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 da. Da 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 da. Right, there are little alternating notes. Those little alternating notes are not the same notes as the ones on top of the horns, largely speaking, as we go, right? So if you were going to be serious about this and clean up this score and get it ready for maybe a reading by an orchestra, which I think you should do, I would fix that harmony, okay? Just make the top, the first horn part conform to the notes that you're leaving out. All right, those downward arcing, the end of the downward arcing phrase. All right, because it kind of isn't. Okay, and then it all comes together very nicely here at the end. But this just feels like this big clanging chord on celesta. It just feels too much, right? Here you have mezzo forte diminuendo to what, right? Here I would say diminuendo to piano. It's okay, mark it piano, because look, it's extremely delicate here at the end. Mezzo forte to mezzo piano. Come on, mezzo forte to piano. All right, everybody go down to piano. Don't score to the sound set. Same thing here. Clarinets down to piano. Right, everybody. And what? We don't know what we're going. Piano. Tell us. Give us a destination dynamic, just like you did here in the horns. All right. And then same thing here. You really have to tell the timpanist how far down they're going. Down to piano. Everybody down to piano. Now you can leave the harp louder because it is just a softer instrument. But here, celesta, you heard that big clang in the mock-up. And it's not going to be that bad, but it will be kind of obtrusive, right? You want the end of this phrase to be just the most delicate release, like a puff of air, right? It's like Lily has gotten out of bed and she's, oh, wow, it's bright, it's sunny out there, I feel healthy, and I'm going to open up the window, I'm going to look out into my garden that I never get to go out because I'm so sick, and oh my goodness, everything's great. And then she throws on her house coat or whatever, and she puts on her slippers and she rushes out into the garden, right? So if you just, it's not like she sticks her head out of the window and then gets hit on the head by a flower pot, right? You don't want that feeling, right? You want it to be right at the end, which is largely you're going that direction. It's just for this clanging chord, right? You can just leave it out, actually. Just put a little ting from glockenspiel would be sufficient because you already have that function happening here in the harp. Okay? All right, so that's my strong advice there. Okay, then this is all very cool, all very cinematic flurries and stuff, and just very good if you are thinking of working in film, and maybe you already are working in film. I don't keep track of everybody's career, but definitely this is the kind of scoring where it's very expressive. It's very very much kind of telling the audience what to pay attention to as the camera moves. And that's all fine. You don't need to mark mezzo piano here for a trumpet. Piano, trumpet, so one solo is going to stand out. Fine. It doesn't need any help. All right? All right, and then little touches from everybody else. A little bit of arco, cello, pizzicato bass, doubled by the contrabassoon. That's all good. Have everybody in the same key, would you? Like this, I don't know why this is all marked in enharmonic equivalents of flats. Was it maybe a harp part that got dumped down here on double bass? So it should be the same thing, because if the conductor says, okay, about that everybody take a look at bar 12. Contrabassoon, you got a B. What do you have there? A C flat in the double basses. Right? Have everybody be in the same key. All right. All right. And then here, tuba, niente. Only use niente when it is an effect that is actually going to be noticed. Right? Pianissimo, diminuendo. You don't need the niente. Only use it when you actually really need that effect, because the player will really try hard to get that effect for you, but nobody's going to be paying any attention to them whatsoever. All right? So you don't need the niente. Seriously, don't use niente unless it is an effect that everybody is paying attention to and they are marveling at the fact that the sound is disappearing. Right? Otherwise, it is just a waste of time for all the players. Yeah, so continuing on, oboe. Just look at this. Beautiful solo line. Doesn't need to be marked up from everybody else. See? Because you scored it right, and it's fine. So it's piano. It's great, right? You don't need to mark up. You don't need to mark up your featured lines, right? Does not need to be mezzo piano. Does not need to be mezzo forte, dolce. All right, and then you got this cute little right. Have everybody be mezzo forte here. Right? You don't have any brass to worry about. Everybody can be mezzo forte here. All right, now here, the problem with going delium and then having everybody else being piano, why don't you go up to these thirds and have everybody go to soft, right? Because you have everything else set up beautifully, right? This is a reaction, and I've mentioned this in other scores. Maybe you haven't seen this yet, but there have been several scores so far that had very, very big first phrases, and then the echoing phrase had a lot of overlap, right? The resonance of the previous phrase basically killed the first beat. The very delicate bum 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 in answer, right? And you have set everything else up so that isn't a problem. That's great. It's awesome, except that you have this rip up to a mezzo forte note. So in real life, not in sound sets, but in real life, this note is gonna just clang out, and then everybody else playing their beautiful soft thing is just gonna sort of like, somebody kind of stepping on a frog, if you know what I mean. Right when a very quiet person is about to give a speech. Okay, but I like the real difference in character here. The pizzicato, pluck, 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 with that diddly, I think that's all really neat. And then just you have very soft, bum, 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 nicely slurred, right? Very cool. There's no such thing as A1. It's one, okay? Everybody, please stop saying A1, okay? A2, right? A2, that means with two players, okay? So 1 is telling us that it is the first player. A1, which one? Is it the first player? Is it the second player? We know that you want us to use one player here. Which player? That doesn't help the copyist, the conductor, the score reader. Don't say A1. All right? I'm seeing A1. Like since the Bartok, people started using A1. I cannot tell you guys enough. There is no such thing as A1. It is either player number 1, 2, player number 2, or A2. Right? Now I'm using 2 of them, but we don't say, oh, with 1. It's just like saying, like, hey, we only have enough room in the car here. Well, I'll take one of your sisters along. Well, which sister? Well, one of the sisters, right? That's up to the sisters, like which one wants to go. We don't say that. We find out which player that we want. All right. So I will rant on this whenever I see it until people stop doing it. Sorry. That was my little soapbox for this score. Sorry, Evan. I think it's a really great score. It's too good of a score for you to make that mistake. All right? Okay, so now, bum, 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 bum. This is all lovely. Just, and I really love this. Remember in a few other scores I was saying I really don't like people going da, 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 da. Right? But in here, you're doing something completely different. You're going da 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 da, and then like the ear is going to focus in on this F sharp, right? And then you have your 2 solo players playing these fifths above, and they are not pulling the ear back up, right? And and then accompanied by some harp and so on. So yeah, that comes to an ending really nicely. Okay, can I point something out here though? That stopped horn is, it has that sound. It just really is like, flat. And I mean, it's got a beautiful sound if you need that sound, but it is really like, it is very squashed. Okay. And then here, if you don't want it anymore, you have to mark open, right? There's even a special little open mark, right? So do not fail to mark that. And as far as tied notes are concerned, publishing standard, continue the mark. All right? Okay, so those are my comments for this score, Evan. Great work. Just really nice. And thank you for giving me so many fun things to talk about. I'm sure there are other things that people might have to say that are helpful for your score. People who are listening to this and you are entrants in the Orchestration Challenge, you know what to do. Give Evan some advice. And Evan, I'm sure that you've seen some things where you could have something helpful to say. Helpful, right? Everybody, keep it helpful. Keep it collegial, right? We're all on the same path here. We all want to succeed with our music and work with orchestras and have a really great time with our careers, right? So let's make that possible for each other. I feel like the stronger the community is through challenges like this and interaction, the better. So please, please comment on each other's scores. I really, really mean it. And it is starting to happen more and more now that I mentioned a little bit on Facebook. And I really appreciate that. But let's keep the energy going. 146 scores. There should be thousands of comments by the time I get to the end of this. All right? So on to the next entry for this group of scores. All right, so now Chris's cool little score right here. I gotta say, I really think this is a lot of fun, and this was another submission that another entry that was the entire score. And Chris, you put a lot of work into it. If you want a full evaluation in the next challenge, then if you're going to do this much work, seriously consider supporting on Patreon for a longer evaluation, because I could easily spend 30 or 40 minutes talking about the entire entry that you worked on. It just was a lot of work. It really kind of deserves more comment than I can give within the limitations of these website entries. All right, so apologies. And with that lame excuse, I'm going to launch into this now. The very first thing to think about here is just like, I mean, there's really nothing wrong with the phrasing, really. Some of these slurs are kind of, I mean, I would have this coming over the top like that. Do you know what I mean? And even here. All right, just a little bit of notational help there. Now here, see, like this, I think you've got two different voices here, and they're just like they're really. One of these needs to be the other direction, right? See, this is that way. It's like you should never have slurs cross. They should just never cross if you could ever possibly help it at all. Okay. See, now I can read that fine. Okay, however, we're going down to a single voice here, so I mean it's pretty obvious that that is first voice, but you should continue on. I'm going to generate something for you here. See, this is for absolute clarity. You should be putting in a whole rest below, right? And then that really clears up how that should be, and and then here, like you're saying ah-two, and then you're going to two voices. Don't do that. Start with two voices, all right? So even if they're playing in unison, so that the two parts go to separate places, right? So here's a way to do that. We just copy first voice, and then we change that to second voice, and then we paste, right? And then we add a slur below as well. Right? And then this slur should probably, at least go to this note, if not the next one. All right, so that is how to solve that notational problem. And then the same thing here. Just tying over to second voice is not good enough. You need either, you need, I would say, like in all of these cases, like in both of these cases, really, if you're going to just go down to one voice, you should do the same thing as I did here. Have separate stems, separate voices, and then add, as we did here, add a rest showing that second voice is no longer in use. Okay, that's just the clean way to do it. Okay, so some notational things. Now, let's go to the beginning and talk about how this is scored. Okay, now here, like in the mock-up that you sent me, it really sounds like a single clarinet, right? Now, are you aware of the sound of A2 clarinets? It's quite distinct. Like, have a listen to the opening of Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, right? There is a phased sound because clarinets don't have any vibrato, and they don't have like a breathy sound like the flutes, which, when playing unison on the flutes, the breathiness of the flute kind of buries some of the intonational differences. With oboe, if the players are really, really precise about each other's intonation, then they can really nail it, except that they end up with a very hard sound. Okay? But with clarinet, you end up with a phased sound because the players do not have any vibrato. Okay, first thing, no vibrato. Second thing, no breathiness, right? So you end up with this very phased sound. It just, it sounds like two electronic voices just slightly out of phase with each other, right? And even great clarinetists can even limit that a teeny little bit, but they're really, I mean, what is the need? I mean, why do you even need a second voice here? Isn't it good enough just to have a single clarinet go ba da da dum, ba da 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 dum, and then have the second clarinet come in right here? It's good enough, right? Here I would say, you probably heard already in a couple entries ago, I said mezzo piano to mezzo forte crescendo is from blah to bleh, right? It's a colorless sound. Just start off piano, espressivo, hairpins, right? So piano espressivo, hairpins, same thing, piano, crescendo to mezzo forte here, all right? And then here, pianist, triple P to P, that's fine. That could all be fine. And it's just nice backgroundy strings. That's fine. Okay. And then the other proportions do not bother me at all. Okay. I think they're fine. Okay. In the trading off as we go, and then you are giving, gradually giving the line to higher and higher instruments so that it is sort of clear and clean through there. I think that you could have less tripling, right? Try not to triple things. Like you're sort of doubling things to overlap so that the trade-off, the handoff, is very clean. But look, you're going, all right, you're handing off here mezzo forte to piano, and mezzo forte to mezzo piano here. This should be going to pianissimo, right? So that you do not even hear, like right here, you'll hear the oboe note like as you try to trade off smoothly to this. The oboe should just leave off here, right? How about if the oboe had a diminuendo right here to pianissimo on this A that they can really control, beautifully control, or this B right here, which they can also beautifully control, rather than C sharp. It's kind of a high, thin note, But anyways, trade off by around here, and then, you're coming in with your piccolo, and you can actually leave off your, the way that this is scored is okay. This is fine. This is okay. Don't change anything. That's fine. Because then you go to the octave here and you have the sort of A2 doubling, and this will work okay. All right? Just being aware that the piccolo is not really going to shine until it gets to this F sharp. This doubling right in here is going to be weak compared to the flute, which is gaining strength in this register, eh? Okay. But everything else I don't have a problem with. Now, here, this is a good support for the oboe. Horns and oboes work together really beautifully, right? This, once again, does not need to be mezzo piano. This could be piano, crescendo, hairpins, right? And it would work great with the horns. Okay, and then here, here I would say have the harmony go to the clarinets, and then you have a way better support. Because even with your flutes being a little louder, and your horns being at pianissimo, the horns are still, the overtones from the horns are still going to interfere with a very clear sound of the flutes. You can even hear that in the mock-up. The flutes are not as radiant as they could be in this lower register right at the beginning, just because the horns are just sitting there, right? So it would be better for the support to be coming from the clarinets. Now, there's one big thing that I haven't mentioned yet, which I'm sure everybody's just itching. It's like, why hasn't Thomas mentioned this before? And that is bassoons always go under the clarinets, right? So right here you have bassoons in the middle. And, maybe you sort of wanted to be able to look at this and kind of think, well, there's some unison motion going on here, and I just really like to keep my double reeds all together. Okay, it's fine for you. If you want to score things that way in your, for your own enjoyment and it makes sense to you and everything else, that is fine. But when you finally send your score to the conductor, you better put your bassoons on the bottom, because that's where they expect to see them, all right? It has nothing to do with what we want. It's what the conductor needs, right? It's not about our needs. It's about the conductor's needs. Okay, and this is all, as far as, the dun-dun-dun-dun, let's take a look at that. I like this. I really like the clarinet staccato with mezzo staccato in the strings and some harp, and then just leaving off and going straight to pianissimo staccato or mezzo staccato just in strings and harp. That's a really nice little echo. I like that a lot. and you didn't end up stomping on the downbeat of this bar right here. That's all good. And then da-da-dum bum bum. This is okay. It's nice. I just feel like, we're kind of missing the scope here, right? So I almost feel like this last thing is sort of almost like a little comment. It isn't like, that sort of unleashing of emotion, right? So like, if we sort of look at our narrative, Lily looking out the window, realizing that it's a beautiful day, realizing she feels great, and she very hurriedly gets herself ready, and she goes out there and she opens the door and she looks out at the beautiful, and she just has this beautiful rush of emotion right here, right? This passion, right? So I feel that it's a little underdone. I think that you could have added more here, maybe even if it was just octaves in the strings, or maybe like a horn pad behind it, or just there's a bunch of different things just to kind of create. Now, but this is what you heard. I'm not going to say that it was a wrong idea or an inferior idea or anything like that. But I just felt, from my perspective as a listener, even if there was just a timpani roll or something, that the scope of this rush of emotion here was a little bit underplayed. Okay, but anyways, really fun, Chris. I mean, like it's obvious you are growing as an orchestrator here, and taking on more complicated ideas and more delicate textures, and just really an excellent entry, and just really enjoyed looking at it just now. And I would love to go over an entire 1 hour score of yours, or excuse me, a 1 hour score, an entire score of yours for an hour at one of the Patreon levels, if you're going to put so much work into it, because the rest of the score was also great and would have gotten a lot of, I know that it would have inspired the educator in me to say a lot of things. Just one last little note for people wondering about these dashed lines. It means that I've taken out some staves in here that weren't needed on the first page, just for the layout here, so that it's very simple and the staves can be as large as possible in this particular screen. Okay, so on to the next entry. And yet another great score from Juan this time. And yeah, just really great, really fun stuff happening. Things being added to the score. Some a rare example of dotted rhythm right in here. Really giving a great sense of motion. I think that Lily would approve of this approach, because she used it herself. When you compare the piano score to the fully orchestrated version of her last couple of pieces, which were scored both in as like trios and duos, and then as orchestral pieces. So let's just go straight to the score. Just one little comment first about scoring, and that is that you must always cancel hang on a second, let me get the keypad up. You must always cancel stop notes with an open mark, right? Okay, let's pull this back together here. Okay, so right back to the beginning here. So starting off, very heavily textured. Now, just to let you know that I really don't feel that this celesta is going to come through very much. Check out my writings about celesta, the dynamic quality of Celesta in 100 more orchestration tips, please. It really has a mezzo piano dynamic. Now, the Celesta itself, within its very limited range of dynamics, can play louder and softer according to its own dynamic level. However, it really cannot play forte competing with the rest of the orchestra. At the loudest it can really play is an accented mezzo piano, which is not really even a mezzo forte. Okay? So just try to bring it out in moments like this. See, when everybody is pulling back and you're going down to a soft dynamic again, then sure, this will be heard right here at the end. Right here at the beginning, you'll hear a little bit, but you would hear a lot more if it were an octave higher. These lower notes on the Celesta, pretty much everything below middle C, has a sort of a thunky sound, and rather than a ding, it's sort of a ding kind of a sound. Okay, so it doesn't have that same level of chiming that you might be expecting, say, from a vibraphone or from tubular bells. Now, let's look at the treatment of the melody. Da 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 dum. Right here, you're going to hear a beautiful mixture of violin and English horn, and these A2 flutes are really not going to come through all that strongly. You can leave them in there just to color it, but it just really isn't much of a contribution to the music. Okay. Now here we're continuing on, going to octave strings, violin and cello. Da da dee da da dum. Okay, and here you've got piccolo, an octave above that. Now, keeping in mind this is a very soft, beautiful, luminous register for the piccolo, but it really does not, it will probably get swallowed up just by the overtones of the violin. This is another tip that is in 100 more orchestration tips, and that is that in situations like this, unless the player is really playing in a soloistic way, the flute player is playing in a way that pushes out of the music, their notes will get swallowed up by the resonance of a string melody in unison below them, right? And especially considering here that we've got the very pungent flutes making the very pungent clarinet combination with the first violins that has a very cutting sound, and then bassoon plus cello. So there's a real chance here that the piccolo will sort of disappear a little bit. All right, and then continuing on. So yeah, this all pretty much works. I really like I was saying before, I like the scoring beneath. Sometimes the melody will just be pretty obvious. It's very, very weighty. There's so much weight here on the melody as we go. But you did compensate for that by having a fuller accompaniment. So that is okay. Once again, Celesta is probably going to be just not even really heard until the very end. Then you got rolled cymbal, rolled bass drum, and then timpani here, just increasing these strokes. I like that. I like the syncopation. That's all very fun. And this is really nice too. The first trumpet playing right in here. You really have to mark this, right? You have to put the number 1 over this, right? And then that lets us know that trumpets 2 and 3 are going to play the other staff, right? Everything else pretty good, I would say. Okay, so now let's go on. I'm trying not to make these are supposed to be 10-minute evaluations, and I just keep adding more and more because there's so many fun things to say, but that, in the end, that just uses up my voice and makes it harder for me to get to the next entry. So I love this right in here. This is good. Bum ba da dum bum. The accompaniment, the little harp chords. I like the the fuller harmony there from harp. So English horn plus strings again. So here I think you should ask yourself, do I want the same exact sound that I had before, right? Well, granted that you had celesta added on plus flutes, but it really is the same feeling, isn't it? It's the same kind of vibe. It's the same basic timbre of violin plus English horn. So do you really want to repeat that just exactly as, almost exactly as it was before? Consider that, it's sort of coming back to what you did. And then this is nice. Da, 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 da. Yeah, and here we are bringing out that that inner voice. This really is the melody right in here, isn't it? Da 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 da. Right, there just needs to be more weight on that middle note. But for the most part, you supplied. Yeah, and especially right in here, this bassoon line right here. That's good. Okay. And then, dun, 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 dun. We have our staccato horns. And right? We have our mezzo staccato repeated clarinets. And, it was really neat here that, like, contrasting that, the staccato and the sort of the nervous repeating of the winds, you had just sul tasto violins playing smoothly, violins and violas. That was great. And then celesta playing this these little fingered tremolo. That's really, really nice. Yeah, tambourine might end up feeling prosaic. Like, it sounds great in the mock-up, but like a live tambourine might be more brash than you are expecting. Okay. Then we've got this right in here. Yeah. So that's kind of fun. I like the idea of like the fingered tremolo resolving, and then you pull like the same kind of thing. You have 4 solo cellos right in here. Shouldn't these also be sul tasto? And also, shouldn't this be a tenor clef, right? Because, like, if we just bear with me for a moment here. Add, I just wish that the pages would stop trying to re-resolve themselves when I added new elements to them. Oops, wrong one. So if we just throw in a tenor clef here, you can see that it's just so much more readable for all the players, eh? Okay, yeah, and little touches of triangle. I really like that in here. So celesta and cello playing smoothly, and then we have the staccato this time given to the clarinets and bassoons, and the repeated notes given to the flutes. That's really a great idea there, and I really appreciate that you have your diminuendo right in here to keep from stomping on the downbeat of the next bar. Okay, and then like right here, this is possible. It's really close to being not very fast. Like if you put a trill or a fingered tremolo too low, going out to the foot joint of the flute, then you have something. The player can go back and they can sort of move their little finger back and forth across the rollers, and they can kind of get a yada 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 kind of sound, but they can't really go. They can't really get that fast tremolo or trill. Okay, so let's talk about the ending here. Bum 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 bum. So in the previous score, I was talking about I felt that the ending didn't have as much emotional power as it could have had. So I really don't like to compare one entry to another, but just for the information of what I'm talking about, it's something more like this. There's a little bit more there's the emotional power comes across a little bit stronger, even though the winds are almost identically scored because of these trombones right in here. And the trombones actually work pretty well with the winds. I'd be tempted to change the dynamics here. Forte in the winds, mezzo forte in the trombones. And then trombones going down to pianissimo and a marked piano at the end of these hairpins, right? That would be a better balance. Anyhow, and a little bit of roll in the bass drum and some timpani right in there. Okay, you have to say where you're coming from, right? So if this is triple P, don't just start off from nowhere, because like your last thing was mezzo forte diminuendo, right? So, make sure that the player knows that they're starting very softly, okay? Some people just get by, oh yeah, crescendo to pianissimo, I get it, but some people don't get it, okay? And certainly the playback engine doesn't get it. It thinks that the last thing it did was mezzo piano. It'll assume the next dynamic down. So mezzo piano crescendo to pianissimo, right? That's what it's kind of sort of scratching its head a little bit, but it'll give you what you ask exactly, right? So just try to mark the beginning one unless it's like really, really obvious. Like if it's an entrance from an instrument that hasn't played before, for instance. Okay, or a very, very long tacit where it's in a new section. I would say otherwise, if you're 3 bars away from a stronger passage, really just mark the entrance as softer. Okay, and then you just end up with this beautiful harp chord and the string scoring. It's all very strong. I really love the contrasts in this, and the colors and the approach. Really feels like a maturing orchestrator and somebody with some great ideas. And it would have been interesting to see, like you go into section A and B and C over on Patreon. So yeah, really nice job, Juan, and please, I'm sure that you would have some insights that would be really valuable to our other entrants here in this group of 6 scores. So please do comment in the YouTube comments or on Facebook if you like. It would be really great to hear your thoughts about these scores too. On to our next entry. And one last great score for this half dozen set, and really, really enjoyable from George. Yeah, there's so many fun things in this. There's still a lot for me to talk about, but yeah, I mean, this has a great, just really strong vision of sound. And I really appreciate also that it's working with limited elements here, just flute, oboe, clarinet for the winds, horns, cornet and tuba, and then harp and strings and so on. So let's talk about one or two little notation things. Now right here, this dynamic here in the harp is this harmonic in the harp is perfectly playable. This one here isn't. However, okay, if you think about this as being an octave down, intended to sound an octave higher, then it's fine. Okay, so just to let everybody know, there's you really shouldn't score above maybe G or A above the staff in terms of harmonics intended to be played at that pitch, sounding an octave higher. Okay, and I fudged a little bit in my orchestration lesson, my version of this piece, in just allowing the Sibelius sounds to, or the note performer sounds to activate. But that's something, I mean, seriously, seriously, note performer. Note performer pitches should sound an octave higher. That is the way that pretty much every harpist I've ever worked with, and that's what they prefer. Okay, they want to see that the pitch that they're going to play with their thumb, they want their thumb to go to that location, and then it will sound an octave higher. Okay, that should be the default. That should be the default for Sibelius sounds. It should be the default for note performer. Get on it. Okay, all right. So going back to this, everything else I think is okay. We're getting, this is just possible. This is the lowest possible harmonic you could play on viola, and that is this this sounding middle C, right, which would be played as an octave harmonic on the C string. Okay, so that is all kosher. That's fine. And this is a very simple octave node open A for this for the strings here. Now, really, you do need to mention divisi, right? So this should be divisi, but you don't need to mention consort, like with mutes twice, right? You only need to mention it once. Maybe this was a copy paste error or something. But yeah, and then once you've said solo, then the next guy is also solo. This is another copy paste error. Okay, so just just certain things stay throughout. All right. Okay, now let's talk about the scoring. So here is an example of the flute taking the melody at the beginning. Remember, we sort of had a big discussion about the flute taking the melody in the seamstress, right? And like how it was, a lot of people were scoring the flute starting out, and they were so thickly scoring around the beginning that the flute wasn't audible, right? So here we have an example of the flute taking the melody, which is happening a lot with these scores as well. However, people are being way more careful about not overwhelming it, and this is a really great example. In fact, a lot of these pitches, like this is middle C, right, played softly, middle C harmonic, played very softly by the cellos, and then right here we've got G up a fifth from that middle C, played by double basses, or solo double bass. And just very, very soft harmonics and dynamics, and that way the harp can come through really, really nicely. One thing which I think is more a question about proportion, and that is whether or not it's wise to use the same trick twice, right? Da 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 da, da 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 da, right? It's sort of like it kind of is. It's kind of like right here, it's like, oh, that's so delightful, that wonderful little burst of color, and just like, oh yeah, we just heard that, right? So it's kind of like overusing something, sort of like the red socks on the second day, right? And then the similar thing happens here. I mean, this is all playable and it's all great, this little trill here from the flute, but should it happen twice, right? Could there be something alternating, right? Like here, this is a beautiful example. You have this big leap here with the flutes, right? And then you have the echo with the harp, right? So could there possibly be some way of echoing this without being, I don't want to say obvious, because it wasn't obvious to you, it was an inspiration, right? But without being something that is so easy, right? Is such an easy decision. So I would challenge you to think of something that could contrast, right? Okay. So back to the scoring. So I really have no problems with any of this. I kind of wish that there had been a bassoon in here somewhere. I think that would have been, a little bit more, could have helped out in a couple of things. But since this is really just only the first 20 bars, maybe you would have added it had you gone on. So harp scoring, it's all fine. I like the added motion here. I think that really helps a lot. Okay. So no problems with anything else going here towards the end. That's all really beautiful, and I really like the way that you let the harp finish everything out. I would say don't allow this to stick out of the dynamic picture quite as strongly, right? Da 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 bum 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 bum. You really have to draw back with everybody. If this is all that strong, it sort of takes away from the release of the music. Okay, and it also competes with the harp to quite a degree. Right? It's just like, if you have this really strong E here with the oboe, the overtones from that oboe are going to interfere with the clarity of this E above it. Right? And then also keeping in mind that mezzo piano to mezzo forte is really is sort of a nothing kind of a dynamic. All right? It's, yeah, I mean, a little bit of a reliance on mezzo dynamics right in here. You could have controlled a lot of that and just kind of kept things softer in general and maybe tried to stay away from some of this a little bit. It's not bad. It's just, yeah, I mean, if you're marking it solo, there's already a presumption that is going to stand out of the texture anyway, right? Okay. Now this I really, really like. The horns function within the strings. It's really, really nice. Just excellent scoring here. I feel like here's a place where the bassoons could have added a little bit of support to the cellos, or maybe could have helped with this pizzicato with staccatos, for instance. That would be another thing that could have happened. Here, the little top note of harmony got left off, but that's okay. It's if the other ones are valid, then so is this. So really, really fun. And then da 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 da. Not staccato at all, except for there is some kind of plucking motion in here. There's some plucking articulation in here, which will kind of add to a kind of more punctuated sound. Now here, like mezzo forte in the brass is going to stomp all over the harp, right? So the harp really needs to be marked up to forte so that it has any kind of a chance whatsoever against the brass. It still doesn't really much. I mean, if you really want this punctuated sound here, I would say pizzicato was the way to go if you need it to compete or to contribute, not even compete with the brass. So bum, 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 bum. And then this is nice right in here, like I mentioned before. Really love this artificial harmonic here, sounding the same G, right? And then response from horns and winds. That is also really, really great. And then dun 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 dun. And this is very cool. So you've got octaves, right, playing through, right? So octave, flute, oboe, and clarinet, triple octave there. And then you're cushioning that with harmony inside the strings, and that works great. I mean, usually it's the other way around, isn't it? It's the winds that are providing the harmony, the harmonic cushion, and the strings that are playing the single notes. But this also works pretty well. This is perfectly fine, even though this is colored red in Sibelius. So yeah, I feel that's a really great flipping of the formula. Of course, if you added brass to this, then I would say you might be better going back to the original formula. And this is nice, of course. A lot of people are opting to do this. The resolution with some harp kind of slowly making its way upwards across it. Okay, but this is really neat to add a soft flute note. But I must point one thing out to you, and that is flutes cannot play harmonics this low. Okay, so a harmonic note is a third partial overblowing, right? So that starts at right around G, right? I mean, technically F sharp if the player has got a B foot on their flute. So G up here at the top of the staff. But this low G is too low to be played as a harmonic, right? So the whole concept behind this is that third partial overblowing for flute has a kind of a softer, weaker sound, and it is similar to the sound of harmonics, of actual harmonics for the strings. So I mean, all overblowing is harmonics for wind instruments, right? So it's kind of meaningless to say harmonic, except in the context of this is that the orchestrators have asked for this so often that the flute players have agreed on that symbol, on the harmonic symbol, to mean third partial overblowing, right? Which has its own unique sound. I think that the note of A above the staff is that the standard fingering for it is actually third partial overblowing, but the players work around it so that the note isn't too weak. All right. So that third partial overblowing just really it's an octave and a fifth, right? So an octave and a fifth above the lowest C is G, right? And then if you have the B foot, I'm not sure if people get that F sharp, but I can't see why it wouldn't be possible. Maybe it just is kind of a funky note. So please keep that in mind. You can't get a harmonic that low. So that's all I've got to say about this great score. Really excellent work, George, and thank you so much for contributing to this challenge, and also, like, I would just really wish that you would, I hope that you will contribute next time this comes around. I'm planning for just to keep going year after year with this. I've got some really great ideas for the next one, and it would be interesting to see your take on them. And I would also really be interested to know what you think of the other scores in this group of scores. So if you would please comment on the scores below, or excuse me, in the YouTube comments below, on the scores that we've gone through in this group, and maybe other scores that you come across watching other videos, watching other evaluations. Okay, it would mean a lot to me. I'd really appreciate that a lot, and I would repeat that for everybody in this group, is to even if just like a good word, like, say, hey, I really love this. I don't, and you might even say, well, I don't even know why I like this, but I really liked it. Thank you for sharing that. That means a lot. You don't have to be an expert. Commenting on other people's scores doesn't really mean that you are giving them advice as if you were the expert or anything like that. That's not what it's about at all. It's just about, if there's some insight about it that would maybe inspire them to better work, then that is worth sharing, I would say, because they're going to give that back to you, hopefully. Okay, so thanks everybody for such great efforts in this group. This was a really special group of scores, and it's funny, that just is the order in which they were submitted for the website evaluations. There wasn't anything about this. I didn't put them all together, but it just so happened that this particular group of scores had a certain resonance with each other, and they were all really great efforts, and they're all by people who are obviously progressing very, very well with their craft. So thank you, everybody, and I'm sure that I'll be able to get yet another one of these compilations finished today, maybe even two more, but I don't want to use up my voice because I've got a big interview tomorrow morning. So anyhow, thanks a lot, everybody, and I will see you in the next video.